Welcome to the Bronx Pinstripe Show. Today is Friday, August 9th. We started recording this a little earlier in the day with Max, around 11 o'clock. We were actually delayed because I am working through some power outages in my area. So bringing this to you, had a great conversation with Max for about 45 minutes, talking about all things Yankees. We didn't dive as much into this past series because this past series was really just a dud. At the end of the day, like there's not a lot to glean from it besides the fact that there's some uncertainty in certain areas, and that's something that we definitely get into. But when you go back through what happened, obviously the rain out on Tuesday gave the Yankees and put them in a situation where they had to have a doubleheader on Wednesday. And Luis Hill pitched. He got through the 5 innings, walked a ton of guys, but got through it. Gave up 2 hits. You can live with some of his walks when he's limiting the hits and the other guys on base. But Yankees got to go through that. They obviously had their bullpen was depleted from that game, and then Will Warren didn't do any justice with coming in and pretty much just giving up that game. From the second inning on, and then Nestor Cortes sprinkled in with a little De Los Santos as well, gave up the runs earlier in the game, so that you're seeing just a runaway against a team that the Yankees need to beat. I mean, that's just plain and simple. The Yankees need to beat it. And when I'm looking at this calendar coming up, there's a lot of winnable games. Notably the White Sox, Detroit. Those are two places that we're going after this home stretch this weekend against Texas. But even Texas, you'd think that you should be able to beat that team. They didn't really give up much at the trade deadline, so they're clearly still trying to go for it. Defending champs, can't count that out. Obviously, Nathan Eovaldi is going to be going up against Garrett Cole, which is just a massive pitching matchup. Andrew's going to be watching that one with sparkles in his eyes, thinking that Eovaldi could be a New York Yankee once again. But yeah, it was good to talk with Max because I think what he does is he gives a different perspective from inside what the clubhouse is. Obviously, he's in there talking to Boone and all the guys after games and such. So it's just I like hearing his perspective. It kind of checks us a little bit as fans because when he's looking at this team, he's looking at it from trying to be objective as objective as possible and looking at what is in front of him and what are some of the whispers that are happening behind the scenes as well. So some interesting stuff that he was talking about, even about Dominguez coming up and what we should expect from that. But yeah, we got a series coming up. Obviously tonight is canceled. That happened while we were talking to Max. The Yankees announced that tonight's going to be postponed. So single admission doubleheader tomorrow against the Texas Rangers, and then finishing up the series on Sunday so that they can go out to Chicago, where they have a new manager because they got fired after losing 22 in a row. Friday, which was today. So tomorrow, it's I assume as long as the pitching stays the same, but we got Rodon and Cole. Rodon going up against Cody Bradford, and who's having a decent year, 3.96 ERA, and Cole going up against Eovaldi, who is a 3.6 ERA. He's done well against the Yankees. Like he's actually shoved against the Yankees. So I would expect that to be a tough matchup. And then our old friend, who I can't believe is still pitching in the major leagues, and I don't know what happened when he was here because he's been effective everywhere else apparently, is Andrew Heaney coming in with a whopping 4-11 record and a 3.98 ERA. So you expect him to give up some base runners. You expect the long fly ball against a guy like Heaney, and all eyes are going to be on Marcus Stroman on Sunday. Obviously, he had the time off, skipped a start, working on mechanics. Max and I talked a lot about that as well. But we're going to be watching him. Hopefully, we're seeing a more polished, sharper Marcus Stroman coming in on Sunday, so that he can turn his mid-season struggles around and be that dependable guy that we really do need in the middle of this rotation. But all right, guys, before I get to Max, I want to tell you about a sponsor that has come onto the show. And I told you about this earlier in the week. I'm a big fan of this brand, Raycon Everyday Earbuds, who I got for Bevan, before they even were sponsoring us. I got for Bevan as a Christmas present, and she absolutely loves them. You wait to you're thinking about Raycon. You're like, I'm getting the same quality that I expect from the big guys, but half the price. That is true, and it sounds pretty damn good. If you haven't pulled the trigger on these new Raycons, you got to do it. They're actually even better now. They just launched their upgraded model of the best-selling everyday earbuds. With Raycon's everyday earbuds, now also you get active ergonomic design, multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with 2 devices at once, and active noise control. Pairing 2 devices at once is huge. They're available in a variety of different colors. I got Bevan the purple lavender, which she loves. She uses them every time she goes in the run, and they actually fit her ear, whereas she's really never had an earbud that has been able to fit and stay in her ear when she's running. The Raycon earbuds absolutely do that. She loves them. And again, these are ones that you can take out on a run. You can take it on a workout, 32-hour battery life. And for whatever reason, if you don't have them charged up for that 32 hours, they have a quick charge function, 10 minutes, that'll get you 90 minutes of battery. That's huge. Multi-point connectivity, as I mentioned, which is you can connect to multiple things at once, which is very cool. And then active noise cancellation, which is great, especially if you're out in a run or if you're in a gym that is getting really loud. You want to hear what you want to hear. But yeah, definitely check out the Raycons. There's no better time. Their upgraded model will blow you away. You're going to ask yourself why you didn't check them out sooner. Raycon also offers a 30-day happiness guarantee, so there's really no reason to wait. Go to raycon.com/Bronx today to get 15% off Raycon order plus free shipping. That's right. You get 15% off and free shipping at buyraycon.com/Bronx. Buyraycon.com/Bronx. All right, guys, here's my conversation with Max. I'm happy to be joined by Max Goodman of NJ.com. Max, thanks for coming on, man, and pinch hitting here to talk about some Yankees overlaying topics. We're not going to get too deep into the Angels series, but appreciate you for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hope all is well.
So why are we recording this at 11 a.m. on a Friday morning, you ask? Well, we're out of power right now at my house. So we've been scrambling around and gone back to, I was just telling Max, we're back to the roots of podcasting. I'm in my in-laws' bedroom because that's the only internet I could find that is close to the house. So we're keeping the train moving, as they say. And yeah, this series, Max, was interesting because, you know, you have Luis Gil started off, obviously the rain out on Tuesday. You were just talking about they didn't get it in early enough where all the writers could stay home. You guys had to go in to report to the stadium because it was late enough. But they seemingly got it well enough for fans to, I think around that time, like 4 o'clock, if that's right around when it was called, that's when people are just like starting to gear up to go and leave to go to the game, depending on where they're coming from. So at least they got it out early for the fans, but it was a wet one, man, with Luis Gil starting off and, you know, not being able to find the strike zone even more so than he normally had been. And then we just got a couple duds, honestly, with Will Warren and then Nestor. The game seemingly were kind of in hand almost before, you know, you got into the full swing of things. But yeah, man, just quick thoughts on the series and what you saw.
Well, for one, I think it's a good thing that they got those games in because I don't know how they would have handled that if they weren't able to get all 3 in before this weekend series started. I think there was a mutual off day at like the very end of the season, maybe as the Yankees come back from Oakland for that last homestand, but that would have been brutal for them at the very end of the regular season than taking that off day away. So
for sure.
In that sense, it's a good thing, but a couple duds is the best way to describe it. The weather was brutal, so conditions were not great for the pitchers. But that's not an excuse because both sides were dealing with that. I think it's advantage hitter in that sense, and the offense was just in a insurmountable deficit in both of those 2 games. You know, I don't know how badly Nestor pitched in, what was it, Thursday night's game. He got burned by that Kevin Pillar hit that was like 3 feet outside, and you know, the Juan Soto dives in and can't block that ball, and it gets by him, and a couple more earned runs come in. And you got to give Will Warren some grace too, because he's trying to figure things out, making a spot start. But it's kind of in line with one of the bigger issues from the summer, and that's the starting rotation has, you know, doomed this team and made the offense try to battle back, but they've been in, you know, too big of a hole early on. And you look at the ERA of the guys in the rotation since going back to June 1st, and everybody except Luis Gil is over 5. And I know that Gil has pitched a little better. Rodon, I think, has turned a corner from a devastating stretch.
Yep.
And again, Garrett Cole's still kind of building up as much as it's been almost 10 starts now. He's got to start to figure that out. But Stroman and Cortez are issues right now. They have a lot to figure out. And when you look ahead, I know we're going to talk about Clark Schmidt coming back. The Yankees have some decisions to make. I think as of right now, those decisions are pretty clear. I don't know if they'll go that route in terms of having 4 starters for the playoffs. It doesn't look like Stroman and Cortez would be in a postseason rotation right now. But Stroman's making a lot of money to be a starter, and Cortez, you like that different look in a rotation to go back and forth between a righty and a lefty. So, I think that, they have, 7 weeks left to try to figure it out. And if not, they might be pitching their way out of a playoff roster spot.
Yeah, just to go back quickly to Thursday evening with Nestor, you're right. That play by Juan Soto, you want to see him block that ball. If you're going to make that effort to go for it, put yourself in a position to at least knock the ball down, because there's nobody behind you, and it's just going to be a merry-go-round at that point, and then game out of hand. But Nestor definitely did get snake bit a little bit by the weather too. I felt like it was raining heavily every single time he was out there on a couple of occasions. So you could tell that he wasn't able to look at the fastball once that rain started coming. He was even like making signals like, please, can we stop this? I just assumed that the umpire and the grounds crew understood that this was like a heavy band that was going to be coming through and then leaving, and they could continue to play. So they unfortunately had to go through it, and for what it is, the Yankees just didn't make out on the right side of that. But you're right. So just talking about the pitching, let's get into that first. We're going to spend some time talking about the catching position, the pitching, and I'd like to talk a little bit about what's going on in Scranton as well. But Marcus Stroman, obviously they skipped his start. He's been very bad recently. I think he and Nestor Cortez both are being plagued by not being able to throw strikes when they want to throw strikes, and not just throw strikes, but throw the ball where they need to be. Even if the ball is supposed to be, a fastball on the outside corner, missing your locations. Like, both of them have not just been not throwing strikes, but they've been missing locations on their pitches. And I think that's been a big problem. And unfortunately for those two guys, you cannot miss over the plate. And from what we're hearing from the Yankees, the skip start by Stroman, there's nothing wrong. We're not looking at an injury, but they're taking some extra time to hopefully iron out some mechanical things.
Right. Stroman spoke at his locker yesterday afternoon, and the sense that we got was that he's very unconcerned about this entire ordeal, and that he thinks it's only been a handful of starts where he's pitched poorly. I mean, you can go back the last 10, and he has a 6-something ERA in that span. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit, where there have been some quality starts in there. It's not every single time he's going out there and it's a clunker, but even when he's pitching okay, he's still grinding through those outings, and it's a lot of misses over the plate. Like you said, it's not that dominant sinker baller, getting the ground balls, pitching to contact and working quickly. And he also has his velocity down quite a bit this year, and he seemed pretty unconcerned about that too. And I get it. He's not a blow by you type of pitcher where he needs to be in the high 90s. He always, pitches with finesse, and if he hits his spots, he's going to get outs. So I think that's more of the focus. But yeah, you said it. They pushed him back to Sunday in an effort to give him a little more time to work through some mechanical things. And he specifically mentioned just the repeatability of his delivery, and he wants to make sure that's consistent. And, that happens for pitchers over the course of a long season. Everyone goes in and out of funks mechanically, and they got to make adjustments. But again, when it's 10 starts in a row, you can go all the way back to his very first outing in June, where he hasn't looked the same. Before that, he pitched pretty well for them. Basically, everybody in the rotation was pitching well, which was kind of unsustainable looking back. Everyone was going 4+ innings. Everyone was, giving them a chance to win. But since then, that hasn't really been the case. And again, like I mentioned earlier, he was brought in to be that reliable veteran in the middle of the rotation to, bridge the gap to the bullpen. And he hasn't been doing that for them lately. I'm not quite sure how he's going to fit if he doesn't turn it around, because I don't see him as a bullpen piece necessarily. I could see them putting Nestor in and having that deceptive long man type of, first guy out if a starter doesn't make it too deep. But off the top of my head, I don't know if Stroman's ever pitched in the bullpen. That kind of strikes me as more of a, you leave him off the roster if he doesn't figure this out. And he's a very confident, egotistical guy in a good way when he's pitching well, but if he can't turn that corner and he's, the clock is starting to tick a little bit, so he has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I know they're saying there's no injury and this is a mechanical thing, but with the velocity down and the extended amount of starts that, like you said, that he's been struggling, wouldn't surprise me if there was a little bit of a dead arm situation, just like, hey, let's refresh. I mean, we saw even what happened with Volpe after getting a couple of days off around the All-Star break, and the kid coming back completely refreshed and back on the good Volpe streak with the way that he was hitting the ball. I think sometimes these guys do need, just a couple days or a little bit extra time to get the body back. Because if your body's not feeling well and you're tired and you don't have the same strength or the same, feeling that you normally do, your mechanics are going to be off, right? So it's like the body fatigue not just hampers velocity, but it absolutely, if probably more so, affects the mechanics and how you can execute your pitches, which can also have if you have tired legs, your velocity is not going to be there. If you have tired legs, your upper body's not going to follow through like it normally does. So I think that's a good thing as well. And I think this was the right decision, honestly, for them to do this. They had to do something. It couldn't just keep going out there. And frankly, there's no other great options to come up and pitch in his spot.
Well, that's a bigger conversation too, and I know we're going to get into Scranton a little bit later, but Will Warren's really the only next guy up that they'd have to come in and make a spot start, because Schmidt is hurt. Petit is hurt. They're still working their way back, and they'll be back soonish, but they're not even on rehab assignments yet. And I think, maybe Chase Hampton would have been ready by now if he didn't spend the whole first half of the year on the IL as well. I think this is also a good segue into Luis Gil when it comes to tired legs. Him walking as many guys as he did in his last start, we'll see if that continues, but I'd say that a lapse in command is synonymous with a pitcher getting tired over the course of a long season, and he's blowing by his career high in innings.
Yep.
I'm very curious to see how the Yankees handle that, because we ask about that pretty consistently, and the sense that we keep getting from the coaching staff and Gil himself is that he's still feeling strong. He's been able to handle this, but he's still coming back from Tommy John here and has never been a big league starter for a full season. I mean, that would be a pretty huge jump in both of those two respective conversations to come back and throw 150 innings when he's already at 120. I just looked it up. And then also be effective in the playoffs. If I were them, once Schmidt is back, I might ease off Gil and start to use him in more of a bullpen role. This is just a hypothetical, right? I mean, I can imagine him being extremely effective and dynamic in a high leverage type of Jonathan Loaizaga role with his stuff. I know you want that kind of pitcher in your rotation because of how good he's been at his best, but you also want to think of his career, and he's still a rookie. I mean, if this is a sense of what he can accomplish in their rotation down the road, you don't want to risk something happening with his arm because he's thrown so many innings. So if they end up deciding that there is a cap to how many innings he's going to throw this year, start to work on him in the bullpen. Maybe he can hone in on his command a little bit better, and then you're adding a strikeout machine if he's able to spot up. But that's obviously a huge risk if he can't have that command in the bullpen. That would be disastrous if you put him in the eighth inning of a playoff game and he walks three guys in a row. At least, Clay Holmes typically is able to find the zone. He'll get burned by weak contact, and when he's off, he'll obviously have those lapses in command too. But I just think the ceiling for Gil as a late inning reliever, I don't know if folks out there listening to this would agree, it's pretty high, and I just don't know how many innings he should be throwing. Right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so the thing with Gil is that you mentioned that if they come up with a cap, right? Like the fact that they haven't said anything about that there's going to be a limit, and he threw 107 pitches on
That's true.
on Wednesday as well. So it's not like 5 innings, 107 pitches. He walked 5 guys, 2 hits. So with Luis Gil, the book on him, right, has always been base runners, whether they're hits or they're walks, and normally they're walks. So he walked 5 guys. The location isn't there. I agreed in the sense that a big strikeout guy in the back of the bullpen is a great thing. His walks have always been a problem for him, though, and I just don't think that he's able to turn that off. I think that what we've gotten to at this point with him as a starter is we can accept it as part of his game because he's not giving up the hits like other guys are. He's letting guys on base, but they're via walk. And at the end of the day, if you're giving up, 5 base runners in a start, let's call it, and 3 of them are walks and 2 of them are hits, you could flip that around and be very, very okay with that from another pitcher if they were hits and not walks, given that they may be singles. Like, that's just a single given up, nothing hurt when it's Luis Gil. Obviously to a point where he can't locate, and you saw that the other night, and 5 walks. He still didn't give up any. He was able to pitch around that, but I do have that concern if we were to throw him in the back of the pen, and that's why I think this is such a interesting situation that's coming up with Clarke Schmidt, because if Clarke Schmidt is fully stretched out, and I believe he mentioned that he said there was a quote the other day, maybe it was last week, where he said, I would be fully stretched out by the end of the season, or and I'm like, well, that's a pretty far. That we still have 2 months, about 2 months to play. I would hope that he can be stretched out closer to that time, because otherwise the situation with Luis Gil, whether there is an innings limit or not, and or Nestor doesn't fix it, Marcus Stroman doesn't fix it, there's a serious issue when you get past, Cole, who still is a little bit of a question mark, and then Rodon, who has come back and pitched the way we expect him to pitch. But I don't know, the rotation becomes much more of a question mark if we can't get Schmidt back to at least see what he is sooner than later.
I wonder if behind closed doors, the Yankees are wondering if they made a mistake not acquiring somebody, whether it's Jack Flaherty or just a veteran that you can trust to eat some innings. I feel like as of now, the best possible postseason rotation would be Cole, Rodon, Gil, and Schmidt. Yeah. And I think that Stroman and Cortez can absolutely prove us wrong and pitch their way back in there. I looked at Stroman's splits when I was writing about him yesterday, and he actually is at his best in September, at the very end of the year. I don't know if that's because he's often hurt and then is coming back and maybe he's a little refreshed, or it's, like I said earlier, just a mechanical thing, and he's able to make that fix, as a lot of pitchers have to do over the course of a long season, and he can find his own at the end. I don't think he's pitched a ton in the playoffs. I know he was with Toronto, but not with the Mets. I don't think he was in the playoffs with the Cubs.
Yeah.
So this becomes a longer season for him, and he's not getting any younger. And Cortez had that one, not flash in the pan, but breakout season that he hasn't really sustained that success since then. So, there are some concerns, because Schmidt, for all we know, it's not a proven commodity until he comes back and shows that he can pitch 5 innings effectively. And if anything, he would be a candidate to go in the bullpen too, because then that would expedite his timeline to get back to the big leagues, which he says that he's ramping up as a starter. So I don't think that this is what they're planning as of now. And I do think that he can get back to a starter's workload within the next, couple of weeks, maybe by the end of the month. And they can also bring him up and do what they did with Cole and have him, for a couple starts, finish off that ramp up process. But, we saw this a couple years ago too. I mean, the bullpen has been good in large part this year, but you also have to think about them and how refreshed they are for a deep postseason run too. Because this isn't a team that's trying to win the wild card round. They want to pitch into November. And if they have no other reinforcements coming, it's just going to be the injured list guys. You're hoping that Ian Hamilton, who regressed quite a bit in the first half of the year before he got hurt, you're hoping that he's, recapturing last year's form. And is Nick Birdie in the picture? Is JT Brubaker going to make his season debut? I don't know. I mean, I think you're rolling with the guys that you have, and that rotation, the ceiling is pretty high, but also there are some grave concerns if things don't work out for all of them. I mean, none of them are sure things right now, right? Rodon still has to prove that he has turned that corner, and Cole has a ways to go until he's back to Cy Young form, certainly. And
they absolutely need, if the Yankees have the hopes to go deep into the playoffs, and make that run. I mean, we absolutely need Garrett Cole to be anchoring the staff and making sure that he's coming out there and being himself, because you're right. The next guys on the list are just, there's a bunch of question marks. Like Rodon, even after seeing the last couple, do you trust him as a playoff starter right now? Like, I don't think many people would say yes to that. We still need to see more of what he can do. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the Scranton stuff, but I want to talk, you've been writing a lot about the catching situation. Austin Wells has been fantastic. He really has. He's been, ever since Trevino went down, he's been extremely good as the everyday catcher. This is a guy that they were splitting time pretty close to 50-50 when, before Trevino had gone down. But ever since we've seen Wells now get the everyday position, get the everyday at bats, which I think has been key for him. He's been absolutely fantastic at the plate. I think very good behind the plate. But even at the Yankees were struggling so desperately in that number 4 cleanup spot. Since he's come in, I got some numbers here. Wells in the 4 spot, 14 games, 359 average, 429 OBP, 547 slugging, 976 OPS with a couple home runs, bunch of runs batted in, not striking out a ton, walking a little bit. So he's actually adding some questions. Like, now that you're walking Judge, there's a guy that's actually being productive behind him. So he's been fantastic. Your thoughts on the catching situation and what it's going to look like when Trevino comes back?
Absolutely. When Luis Severino a couple weeks ago said the Yankees have 2 hitters, I think now it's at least 3, because Wells has been spectacular this summer, and it's really recognizing the potential that he's had since they drafted him in the first round in 2020 out of Arizona. Yeah. That was always his, ideal scenario, that he would come up and be a force from the left side of the plate offensively. I've been very impressed with his defense. You ask any pitcher in that room, and they think that he's doing a good job with, managing a game, and his StatCast numbers would support that he's improved quite a bit as a framer, going back to in the minor leagues when that was a whole narrative with him that he wasn't going to be able to defend at the big league level. And offensively, he's been great. I mean, no one's able to really provide the protection that would, lead teams to not intentionally walk Judge, as we've started to see recently, and I think we'll see quite a bit over the last couple months of the year. But he's in a position to make those teams pay and to drive in runs, and they didn't have that when Stanton was on the injured list. Stanton hasn't really found his rhythm just yet. It's only been a couple of games, so they really have a catcher of the future type of player right here, who, if he keeps this up, he might win Rookie of the Year too. I think he has an outside chance depending on how that landscape changes. What will be interesting, though, is how the playing time is split up when Jose Trevino comes back. Trevino is on the brink of a rehab assignment, so he can be back, within another week or two, I'd say. Probably a little longer than a week, because it's a quad, and, he's squatting back there. He's got to run the bases and all that. But the sense that I got because Boone was asked about this just yesterday, the sense I got was that it won't be a 50-50 split, but Trevino will still play a lot. It's just that Wells has earned more and more playing time, which is a fact. Before Trevino went on the IL, it was exactly a 50-50 split. The first 96 games of the year was 48 starts to each of them. And I know a lot of that depends on what the pitching matchup is in terms of righty-lefty, if someone has reverse splits, whatever it may be. There really isn't a starter on the staff right now that has a personal catcher type of situation. Which I think
thankfully.
Yeah, but that's a testament to Wells' growth and the fact that
100%.
they're comfortable throwing to him. So I think the best lineup has Wells in the middle. Maybe if you're facing a lefty like they did last night, you bump him down one spot and have Stanton hitting 4th if he can get back to, the vintage Stanton form. But you have to make sure that Wells is still fresh. I know he's only 25 or whatever it is, so he should be able to withstand this huge increase in playing time, and that's obviously, you add a little bit of impact there as a catcher. But again, the best version of this team in the playoffs is Wells is going to be catching, and I think Trevino can be a great second option for them, just playing maybe 60-40 or 70-30 even, nothing close to what it was before his injury.
It's going to be very difficult to take the bat out of the lineup at the end of the day. I think the defense, like you said, the guys seemingly enjoy throwing to to Austin Wells. Trevino, we know, has the respect and the the familiarity with all the guys, so that he's a favorite to throw to. But the bat, I mean, before Wells was in this 4 spot, it was a black hole. It was the worst in baseball. Like, that's not even parody. That is it was the worst in baseball, the 4 spot. And then he's come in, and he even gives the lefty righty that Boone absolutely loves and will force at times to get. He gives him that, and he's been nothing but good. So, that's another thing to even look at. There's so many fluid situations, I feel like, with this team. But as you're seeing Stanton come back too, and hopefully he can play that role and be that cleanup guy in against lefties. But there may be a situation now where you're looking at Wells and you can't take that bat out of the lineup. And if you see Stanton struggling, maybe Wells will DH a few of the days, depending on what the matchup is. But I don't think at this point they can take the bat out of the lineup. It's been too good. And you're right. From the mouth of Luis Severino, 2 guys turned into 3. If you take him away, we're back to 2 guys.
Yeah, obviously they hope it won't only be 3. And I think that the offense has looked better,
it has.
Certainly on the road trip where they started to win series again. But this was a dud for them against the Angels. I think just bottom line with Wells is that even when he's getting out, it's often hard contact, fly balls to the warning track, line out to second, and it's a lot of quality at bats. He's getting on base. I think the maturity stands out to me that he doesn't come across as a rookie like at all anymore.
100%.
And I think that him getting to play this much this summer and get these reps, obviously you don't want to lose a starter caliber catcher to an injury in Trevino, but it was a good thing for Wells that he's been able to see pitching every single day. I can't imagine how hard that is to be, so close but so far in terms of getting that playing time and taking that next step. That's not something that Anthony Volpe had to deal with. He's been able to see pitching every single day since he came up. That wasn't the case for Wells. And you finally saw him at the very end of September last year start to find a rhythm, and then the season ended. So it's just a case of a really good hitter starting to figure things out, getting more experience. And, that's a really good thing for the middle of the order. Jazz Chisholm has been great this season. If you go back to the Marlins with runners in scoring position, that lengthens the run producing part of the order. And, Volpe, like you said earlier, has been good since the All-Star break. Glaber maybe is turning a corner if he hustles out of the box. We'll see. And I'm not so sure about Alex Verdugo because, the numbers, if you go back several months, are not great, but he's been hitting the ball a little harder these last few days. So those are fluid situations too. You just don't know what version of those players are going to be, what they're going to be producing at the very end of the year, because that's what matters most for this team. Obviously, they want to win the division. You want to get a good seed, and you can start to think of postseason matchups as we get closer to that and start to look at the bracket every single day. But this team needs to find their rhythm and start to play well at the very end of September and be healthy at that point too. I don't obviously Dominguez would be the next piece that would come up and replace somebody, but there really aren't other pieces coming up from AAA. This is the club that they're going to have, and Jazz was the only offensive piece that they brought in. So, also credit to DJ LeMahieu, who has looked like a completely different hitter these last few days. And, I know a lot of fans have given up on him, rightfully so, with how he produced this summer. But if they can have him and Oswaldo playing like they are right now, it makes the team better. It's a good problem to have if you have players on the bench that are playing well and quite frankly deserve to be starting. And certainly with Cabrera, he's been good for a while now this summer too.
He has been, and I love it. But the thing about him is he's so valuable in the role that he's in currently, where he doesn't have to play every single day. He's able to spot start. He's able to play multiple positions. Like that guy is a needed commodity for a team that's going into a playoff run. So, hopefully we can see more progress from other guys so that he can stay in that role, because I think he's really valuable in that role, and he fits what they need for that utility guy. And you're right. I was gonna mention, if you didn't, the old man DJ LeMahieu, who I think ever since the first we saw that first extra base hit, we saw a first home run from him, but it's been slowly coming on. And you're right, over the past week, ever since he had that 6 RBI day, he's been hitting the ball hard. Even when he's been getting out, he's been hitting the ball hard. He's been going to all fields as well, which is truly vintage LeMahieu is what you see. Now I expect him at best, is he 70%, 80% of where we thought he might be? But frankly, like him coming back changes and playing at a high level changes the dynamics of this lineup as well, because you can put him in that leadoff spot. If he gets back into the trust circle, you can put him back into that leadoff spot, and that takes care of a lot of problems, because that's giving you really good at bat at the top of the order, which will protect not as much as the four hitter, but it will give protection to Soto and Judge if you can get that first guy on base and work the count and do all the things that he does so well at the leadoff spot. If he's able to continue that, I think that makes this Yankees offense that much better.
Well, keep in mind too that DJ is under contract for a few more years,
100%.
making a lot of money. So if he's able to show that he can be a legitimate contributor, obviously not the batting title champion like he was, but you're stuck with him for a few more years, right? And I think he was getting closer to Aaron Hicks DFA territory with how he was playing all summer. And the Yankees kept giving him his playing time, and he's been working through things on the cages behind the scenes, and it's starting to work out. I mean, I'm not going to start saying that he's back just yet. Like, I think we see that for more of an extended stretch. But yeah, I think that we can also talk about first base and how, I'm an advocate of Ben Rice. I wrote a big story on him last year. I'm excited to see his potential over the next several years, but his numbers overall have not been, groundbreaking since that 3-homer game. He's having a little bit of growing pains and adjusting against big league pitching. So, he doesn't play that much against left-handed pitching, and you see DJ come in and replace him at first late in games a lot. Obviously, they're comfortable with Rice defensively because he's starting so much, but in a big spot in the playoffs, maybe they want DJ over there. And also, who knows what the situation is going to be with Anthony Rizzo, who was swinging against live pitching the other day when Schmidt and Petit were throwing. And that kind of caught us a little off guard. Me and some of the other beat reporters were sitting there because a couple days before that, Boone had said that Rizzo was only taking light swings. And then here he is hitting a line drive to right field off Clark Schmidt. That seems like he's a little further along, coming back from a fractured arm. I don't know what the Yankees would do when he's healthy, right? I mean, what they would probably have to do is either send Oswaldo down, which I don't think they would do, DFA LeMahieu, which I don't think they would do, or send Rice down. And I guess that's what they would do, right?
I think that's what they would do.
If you're thinking that Rizzo's going to be a real piece down the stretch and into the playoffs, obviously he's really good friends with Aaron Judge and is extremely battle tested when it comes to the playoffs. Like, you want him there, but it's a different dynamic if he's just in a hoodie in the dugout versus actually playing, and the timely mound visits, the impact in the middle of the order if he's at his best. But like the conversation with LeMahieu, Rizzo's been a shell of himself since he collided with Fernando Tatis in May of last year.
Which is crazy. So, yeah, which is crazy. And you saw some things from him early in the season in spring training where it seemed like, that was a thing of the past. And I don't know how that stuff comes back. I mean, I don't think anybody that's probably one of the hardest things to identify. I mean, look what happened with Clint Frazier. There's the third baseman who was here. He's playing for the Angels now. My name. Drury, yeah, with tunnel vision. He just needed glasses. You know what I mean? Like sometimes when you have something going on with the head, it's so hard to understand. One, if it's affecting you. Two, even as the person, I think sometimes it's not as easy to identify if it's truly affecting you with how a slight impact can affect hitting a ball that's coming at you 95 miles an hour so profoundly. But yeah, I the fact that you're saying that he's hitting and he's taking swings and hitting off Clark Schmidt, things like that, it does seem like he won't be doing that if the fracture is still an issue. So I would not be surprised if we see him in a few weeks here, right? Before the end of the month, something like that, just to see almost like a trial run, like right before the end of the season. Can we get him back? Is he back? Because of the struggles that you mentioned with Ben Rice. And for Ben Rice, to his credit, I'm a fan of his as well. I've been watching him come up the ranks. I was calling for him when he was in Double-A because of everything that was being said about the kid. And he's had productive at bats. He's still been walking. He's still got great command of the strike zone. So you see in him what he can be, I think, which I think is a really positive thing. I think it's for him to come up and excel over an extended period of time and just stay consistent is a really tough ask at this point for him in his career coming up from Double A. So I'm still very hopeful, even if he were to get sent down. Like, I think he's got a good future, and he'll certainly compete for playing time moving forward. And just some quick numbers on LeMahieu. Since that first home run, 14 games, 31 at bats, 258 average, 802 OPS. So you take that, right? Like, 802 OPS. I'm taking from DJ LeMahieu at this point for sure.
I can't overstate how important those, like, that next tier of hitters in this lineup, how important those guys are for a deep postseason run, because you can count on Judge and Soto to be these, otherworldly contributors and superstars, MVP caliber players with the numbers they're producing. But, we'll go back to what Severino said, right? I mean, like, this is a situation where for an extended stretch, it was just two real contributors in that lineup. And that's something that could certainly happen when the calendar flips to October, if it's the worst case scenario. So you need as many of those next level hitters that are starters, or at least starter caliber, to produce at a high level, because it lengthens the lineup. It strengthens it. At the very beginning of the season, coming out of spring training, Aaron Boone was talking about how this lineup has the ability to grind pitchers down, and there are no holes. It's the longest lineup that he's had in years. And we saw that early on, right? I mean, in all fairness, I think the Yankees still lead all of baseball in runs this year. Like, there's still a pretty dynamic offense. It's just in this market and with recency bias, we all were criticizing them with how they looked this summer, because it was completely different than the first few months of the year. As much as Judge and Soto were still doing, amazing Hall of Fame level things. So you need LeMahieu, you need all those guys that we've mentioned, the bottom of the order. And the leadoff spot, who knows? Who knows who it's going to be in game one of the ALDS? It could be any of those guys. But yeah, I mean, LeMahieu at his best is perfect for that spot, because he's able to go to all fields, drive in the runs that are still on base from the bottom. And I think that the Yankees are really liking Anthony Volpe in his new role. I don't know if they'd bring him back up. Part of that, I think, is because you don't necessarily want a base stealer running when you have Soto and Judge coming up next, but
he's not running. I mean, they're not even letting him run in that spot really anymore, right? Too. So, and
it is an added dimension with him and Jazz. They had that double steal.
Oh, maybe so excited!
At the beginning of this homestand, but you haven't seen them steal as much this entire season. So, a lot of different moving parts with this lineup. I mean, it's cool to keep an eye on how the Yankees are going to do that over the next several weeks, because there are a lot of questions.
Last thing, first of all, game rescheduled, postponed for tonight.
Oh, really?
Yeah, breaking news. So you're good before you had to report as well.
4 minutes. There we go.
The last topic is talking about some Scranton things, but also Volpe. He was pulled from the game after. First of all, can we stop fouling balls off of our feet, please? Because it seems like it's been the cause of a lot of injury for the New York Yankees, and I'm sick of it. The guards are not the guard industry needs to step up their game and protect more of that foot, apparently. But is there anything new that you heard from the guys about Volpe getting pulled?
They're treating it as a contusion. The X-rays came back negative, so I guess that's a little bit of good news. I wasn't sure if he was going to play today, so obviously now if there's no game, it gives him a day off when typically he plays great. Every day. Yeah, so that's good for them as well. Fun story, I fouled a ball off the inside of my ankle when I was in high school, my junior year, and it's still pretty swollen to this day. And I wore, well, I guess at that point I hadn't put a shin guard on yet, but at that point I bought one of those Evo shields.
Yep.
And it only covers so much, right? Like, you're still so susceptible to hitting it off the parts that aren't covered. So I don't know if there's a way to just put your entire leg in a bubble wrap or something like that, but I think technology will start to get better.
It will, yeah. But I feel like every time I turn around, someone's fouling a ball off their foot and limping around and hopping around.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's remember what happened with Matt Carpenter? I mean, that really changed the trajectory of that season too. And LeMahieu's entire season was altered from
LeMahieu's career has been altered by foot injury.
Yeah.
It's you realize how important the feet are when you're trying to actually hit a baseball or throw a baseball, field a baseball. Okay, so the only other piece, there's a whole bunch of bullpen spots that I think could be up for grabs, and who knows what happens in AAA with some of these guys that are coming up with Efros and Brubaker and some of these other folks that might end up being a piece in the bullpen later on, because guys like Tim Hill or Tonkin or, wouldn't be surprised if those guys, went through another little bad stretch and someone else got pulled up. It feels like a revolving door even still, to be honest. But the big name down there, obviously, Jason Dominguez. If Verdugo doesn't find more consistency, I know he's been better, but if he doesn't find that consistency, there's no reason to keep running him out there if they don't feel good about him. If Jason Dominguez is down there, Verdugo is a 1-year guy. There's nothing that he's not going to be on this team most likely next year. So if Jason Dominguez is healthy and Jason Dominguez is performing, I know I speak for probably every single fan of the New York Yankees. We want Jason Dominguez to be playing left field and being another dynamic bat in this lineup, and not watching Verdugo play every day.
What I will say to play devil's advocate, because I also want to see Dominguez up here, because I'm so curious to see how he'll handle more than just 8 games.
Yeah.
I think that you have to factor that in and preface the fact that he's only seen a handful of games of big league pitching. He's really only played in, X amount of AAA games because he missed so much time and got called up pretty quickly from that level last year. So you can make a case that the best thing for Dominguez is to have, let's say all of August to just play every day in AAA, because he's missed out on a lot of development time.
For sure.
And obviously he's shown the superstar capabilities at this level, but he didn't do it for a full season or anything. It's not like you have a player coming back from a rehab assignment that's a big leaguer for years and years. Now, yes, it's totally possible that he could get called up and immediately be a spark and take off in the rest of his career, and he's in Monument Park in 25 years. But I can totally understand why the Yankees are being patient when they have Verdugo, who they are very high on, and when Verdugo's at his best with his bat-to-ball skills and his defense, I can see why they want him in left on a daily basis. So I don't think the Yankees will call Dominguez up to not play him. I think that they're going to wait until there's a situation where maybe somebody gets hurt and then they would bring him up, because I haven't checked in the last few days, but I think he's back to normal-ish in terms of playing most games and going through all 9 innings. Obviously, when he first went back to AAA, it was, he's playing 5 here, he's DHing the next couple of days. So there were still some growing pains with the injury stuff. But he's coming back from Tommy John still, and obliques, as we've seen with Judge and other sluggers. Yeah, and you don't want to mess with something like that with a 21-year-old who, if you've seen Dominguez play, his swing is mighty. I mean, and it's from both sides of the plate. So you really have to be careful of his midsection with that. So, do I think Dominguez will be up in September? Yeah, I mean, he would make sense as a September call-up. But you factor in Rizzo, and, John Birdie is also on the way back. I don't think that they would necessarily choose Birdie over either of those other two, especially if Oswaldo's playing well, because he's kind of that same player to a certain extent. But I don't know what they're going to do with Dominguez. I feel like every podcast or radio hit I do, that's a question, and the answer just hasn't presented itself yet. We'll see if everybody stays healthy. And down the stretch, I think that him playing at the level he did when he came up last year, or the potential that he's showing in the minors, the best version of their lineup might be with him in it. But I think we're also soured on Verdugo with the way that he's played for the last several months. So there's totally a scenario where they stick with Verdugo if he can break through, and maybe you bring Dominguez up just to have it like what Jeter did his first year, where he was with the team in the playoffs. Maybe he's on the roster and he's a guy to get a start every now and then and pinch hit late in games or something like that. But, he needs to play every day. And if you want him to be a postseason piece, you probably have to have him play every day in September, because he's got to get himself ready for that. That's a huge jump for someone who's only played 8 MLB games, and it was a year ago.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And, rephrase what I was saying a little bit, tighten it up, is I don't think they need to rush him right now. I think they, if he starts beating the door down and he's just dominating in AAA, I think it'll be tough to keep him down there. But you're right. If Verdugo slips, that's the thing. Like, I don't even think it needs to be an injury. I think if Verdugo slips and he goes through another, because at one point, not only were we talking about the black hole at number 4 spot, but he was part of that for a little bit. He was, I think, at one point the worst qualified major league hitter in baseball. So this is a guy that has fallen, all the way down to the very bottom of players in the league, but also came out of the gate extremely well. Plays a very good left field, which we know about. Saved a run the other day by playing the ball off the wall as well as he does. I'm not going to say anything bad about his defense. I think the guy's a tremendous defender. It's all about that dynamic bat. And you're right. Maybe giving Dominguez that consistent play is important for him, because he does need that development. He needs to get the mechanics down. He needs to make sure that he feels confident with the swing in that midsection and everything that he's been kind of working back from Tommy John. So, yeah, I think he would have to press the issue really, and it'd have to be the perfect scenario, because they don't really need to. They have a lot of winnable games coming up, and I know I'm saying that coming off of losing 2 of 3 to the Angels, but they do have a lot of winnable games coming up in this next month, and hopefully they're able to take advantage of some of that pitching and put up some runs with who they currently have and build some momentum, and hopefully a little bit of a gap between the Orioles. But yeah, we'll see. I think at the end of the month is going to be prime time to start looking around and saying who's doing what, where are these guys coming, where are they playing. We need to get this what our playoff roster looks like very soon here, so we can actually see it in action.
Right. I mean, you're finding that balance between the postseason roster and opening day of next year. And if Verdugo is going to leave, whether Soto comes back or not, that's one spot in the outfield that, unless they're going to move forward with Trent Grisham in center and put Judge in right, which they're not going to do. I think that Grisham is a solid, maybe a little overpaid 4th outfielder. That's not the fault of the Yankees that they got him in the Soto trade. But they do like Grisham a lot, and he's been pretty solid offensively for a long stretch here, marginally compared to the rest of the lineup. And obviously it's Gold Glove defense, as much as that one play where he bobbled the ball has changed the fan base's perception on him. But, it would either be Dominguez or Grisham that would make a postseason roster, I think. You don't necessarily need a 4th and a 5th outfielder and Oswaldo if you're going to think of him as a possible emergency piece out there. Obviously, Stanton hasn't played outfield. I don't think we're going to factor that in for this year or maybe even beyond. But, do you want Dominguez playing more often and have him as another outfield piece? Maybe Verdugo's coming off the bench, or do you just stick with a pretty good thing with Grisham coming in and being that defensive replacement or getting a couple starts? I don't necessarily see how he would start in the playoffs, but it's been nice for the Yankees to be able to have Judge get his DH days and mix that in, because it helps with his longevity. And then opening day next year, I can certainly see Dominguez in the outfield. I think that's the plan A with how the roster is constructed right now, because I don't know if Verdugo would come back, and I think obviously they're going to do their best to bring Soto back, and he would be in right. So
yeah, I mean, another interesting piece of that too is because of the flexibility they've added, Jazz Chisholm is an interesting person to think about too, because I think Grisham's going to have a tough time making that roster with Jazz's ability to play center field as well. If a guy like John Birdie has the ability to play more of the infield, you have a good glove out there. You never know where they could play him. Jazz, I think my favorite part about him coming over is the fact that he's willing to do whatever the Yankees want him to do to win ball games. And I think as a fan, when you're looking at that, that's number one, first and foremost. And he's added that. So, cool. Max, man, I appreciate you for coming on, dude. This was a lot of fun. Took my mind off of the wet days that we just saw with Anaheim, and looks like we're going to get a day off tonight. I think the guys need it a little bit from after being soaking wet and Volpe getting banged around a little bit, but it looks like doubleheader tomorrow. So good luck at the stadium, man, and really appreciate you for coming on.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me, man. And this schedule this month for the Yankees, they've got to take care of business these next few weeks. They really don't play that many, good teams if you look at the standings. So you lose a series to the Angels, and that's not great, but you got to figure out how they can bounce back and take care of business against these other teams. Because I'm astonished that the Orioles didn't run away with the division. 100%. The Yankees were reeling like they were. So you got to figure out how to make the Orioles pay for not playing better when the Yankees and the White Sox were the worst two teams in the league for over a month.
Yeah.
But,
and now you got the Holiday kid who's up there actually hitting now. So that's,
right. And they made all those trades. So, I think it would be fun to see them play against each other in the ALCS. Maybe reignite the rivalry within the division a little bit more. You had the benches clearing earlier, two really good teams. But we were in the press box. I know you already said.
Let's keep going. No, this is great. This is how I end calls with my family all the time. Like we never get off the phone.
Yeah, we were in the press box trying to figure out, where we might be going, if we should start looking at hotels for October, getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. But, there are quite a few different cities they could be going to for the division series. And then obviously they wouldn't play Baltimore in the first round because it'll probably be the top wild card spot for either of those two teams. And then one of the two that gets a bye because the AL West division winner will be much lower and they'll have to play in the wild card round. So I think the AL is pretty open. I don't necessarily see Cleveland as much as they have. I think it's the best record as of now, or they're right up there. Maybe I'm underestimating them, but they just don't, explode to me on paper with their roster and their ability to go deep in the postseason. But yeah. I think it's anyone's pennant to win to a certain extent, because if the Yankees and Orioles keep showing that they're susceptible to being beaten by bad teams, who knows if Seattle can go on a run with their good pitching staff, or Houston has been there before and they have the veterans, or Kansas City might shock everybody. Minnesota's been good this year, and obviously Cleveland. So it should be an exciting stretch run, and I'm sure I'll talk to you guys about it again soon.